FANATIC confronted John Lennon backstage. What John whispered to him changed everything. The city of London, a sprawling beast of brick and shadow, breathed a cold, damp breath in the winter of 1974. Its ancient stones held secrets, whispered through the ages, but none so potent, so unsettling as those that clung to the figure of John Lennon. He was a ghost, a myth, a prophet, and a pariah, all at once. His voice, once a beacon of youthful rebellion, now echoed with a different kind of truth, one that many sought and few truly understood. But for some, the search for that truth became an obsession, a consuming fire in the soul. Deep within the city's grimy heart, where the Thames flowed like a dark, indifferent vein, a young man named Arthur walked. His eyes, usually sharp with a restless intelligence, were now clouded by a singular fixation: John Lennon. Arthur had once been a disciple, a true believer in the gospel of peace and love. He had devoured every lyric, every interview, every cryptic utterance from the man who had dared to imagine a world without possessions, without war. But the world, Arthur had learned, was a brutal, unforgiving place. And the idols of youth often crumbled under the weight of their own contradictions. The whispers had begun subtly, then grew into a roar in the underground press, in hushed conversations in smoky pubs. Lennon, the prophet of peace, was living a life of excess, of indulgence, far removed from the struggles of the common man. The revolutionary spirit, it seemed, had been traded for gilded cages and the hollow echo of fame. For Arthur, this was more than just gossip. It was a profound betrayal, a wound that festered, turning admiration into a bitter, burning resentment. He felt cheated, lied to, a pawn in a grand, cynical game. He spent his days poring over newspaper clippings, listening to bootleg recordings, searching for discrepancies, for the cracks in the carefully constructed facade. He saw the opulent homes, the lavish parties, the endless stream of limousines, and a cold fury began to simmer within him. How could the man who sang "Imagine no possessions" live in such gilded splendor? How could the voice of a generation become so detached, so seemingly hypocritical? The questions gnawed at him, twisting his perception, until Lennon became less a hero and more a puzzle, a riddle he was compelled to solve. Arthur believed there was a hidden truth, a secret narrative woven into the fabric of Lennon's existence, and he was determined to unearth it. He saw the public appearances, the carefully curated interviews, as mere illusions, smoke and mirrors, designed to obscure a darker, more complex reality. He felt a strange, almost magnetic pull towards the man, a desperate need to confront him, to tear down the veil and demand answers. This wasn't just about a fan's disillusionment. It was about a search for authenticity in a world that felt increasingly fake. A world where even the most powerful voices seemed to lose their way. The opportunity, he knew, would not come easily. Lennon was a fortress, surrounded by layers of security, publicists, and sycophants. But Arthur was patient, meticulous. He studied Lennon's movements, his routines, the venues he frequented. He learned the rhythm of his life in London, the secret entrances, the back alleys, the moments of vulnerability. He was no longer just a fan. He was a shadow, a silent observer, preparing for a confrontation that he believed would either redeem his idol or expose him as a fraud. The air grew heavy with anticipation, a silent countdown to a moment that would shatter the fragile peace surrounding John Lennon. The city itself seemed to hold its breath, its fog-laden streets concealing the convergence of two disparate souls, one seeking answers, the other perhaps, unknowingly, seeking a mirror. The stage was being set, not for a performance, but for an unraveling. Hey, before we continue with this incredible story, I need to give you an important warning. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube has removed their subscriptions without notice. Just take a quick look at the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss any of the exclusive content that's coming up. And while you're there, leave that powerful like that helps me a lot with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who is part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's interact. John Lennon, in the mid-1970s, was a man adrift in a sea of his own making. The revolutionary fire that had once burned so brightly seemed to flicker, sometimes barely a spark, sometimes a raging inferno of self-destruction. London, the city that had once been the crucible of his creativity, now felt like a cage, a constant reminder of a past he couldn't escape and a future he couldn't quite grasp. He lived in a grand, almost theatrical isolation, surrounded by art, by music, by the echoes of his own legend. But beneath the surface, a profound restlessness churned. His days were a mosaic of intense creative bursts followed by periods of profound ennui. He would spend hours in his studio, a sanctuary filled with instruments and recording equipment, chasing elusive melodies, wrestling with lyrics that sought to capture the fractured spirit of the age. Yet the inspiration often felt forced, the words heavy with a cynicism that had replaced the youthful idealism. He was a man caught between worlds, the public icon, the private soul, the artist, the husband, the father, each pulling him in different directions. The weight of expectation was a physical burden, pressing down on his shoulders, twisting his thoughts into knots. The London he inhabited was a stark contrast to the vibrant, hopeful city of the 1960s. The optimism had faded, replaced by economic strife, political unrest, and a pervasive sense of disillusionment. The dreams he had once sung about seemed to mock him from the headlines. From the faces of the disillusioned youth who still clung to his words, even as he struggled to believe them himself. He saw the hunger in their eyes, the desperate search for meaning, and it weighed heavily on him. He knew he was a symbol, a vessel for their hopes, but he often felt empty, a mere reflection of their desires. The city's gray skies seemed to mirror the gray areas of his own conscience. His personal life was a tempest. The public gaze was relentless, dissecting every move, every relationship, every perceived misstep. The media, once his ally, now often portrayed him as a caricature, a fallen idol. He craved privacy, yet thrived on attention. He preached peace, yet often found himself embroiled in conflict, both external and internal. The contradictions were a constant companion, a shadow that followed him through the opulent rooms of his Tittenhurst Park estate, through the bustling streets of Mayfair, and into the quiet solitude of his own mind. He was a man of paradoxes, a walking enigma even to himself. He sought solace in various forms, art, philosophy, even fleeting moments of anonymity in the city's less glamorous corners. He would sometimes wander through Kensington Gardens, a solitary figure in a long coat, observing the ordinary lives unfolding around him, a stark contrast to his own extraordinary yet often lonely existence. He carried the weight of a generation's expectations, the burden of a legacy that was both a blessing and a curse. He was a man who had dared to imagine a better world, and now he was forced to live in one that seemed determined to prove him wrong. The very air of London, thick with history and unspoken stories, seemed to press in on him, demanding answers he didn't possess. The public saw the headlines, the controversies, the carefully crafted image. They saw the rock star, the icon, but behind the closed doors, in the quiet moments between the chaos, John Lennon was a man grappling with his own humanity, his own flaws, his own profound sense of responsibility. He was searching, just like Arthur, for something real, something true, in a world that constantly demanded artifice. He was an open wound, exposed to the world, yet desperately trying to heal, to find a new path, a new voice, in the cacophony of his own fame. The stage was set, not for a concert, but for a collision of worlds, a confrontation that would peel back the layers of myth and reveal the raw, beating heart beneath, a heart that, despite its fame, was as vulnerable and searching as any other in the vast, indifferent city. The opportunity Arthur had meticulously planned for finally arrived. John Lennon was scheduled for a rare, intimate performance at a small, exclusive club in Soho, a venue known for its discreet back entrances and a clientele that valued privacy as much as prestige. It was not a grand arena, but a smoky, velvet-lined room, a perfect stage for a more personal drama. Arthur had spent weeks observing the club, mapping its labyrinthine corridors, learning the routines of the staff, the blind spots of the security. He moved like a phantom, his presence unnoticed, his intentions unseen. The night was cold, a biting wind whipping through the narrow streets, carrying the scent of stale beer and exhaust fumes. Arthur, dressed in nondescript clothes, blended seamlessly with the late-night revelers and shadows. His heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribs, a drumbeat of anticipation and fear. This was it, the moment of truth. He carried no weapon, only a burning question, a desperate need for clarity that felt sharper than any blade. He needed to look Lennon in the eye, to strip away the layers of fame and demand an accounting. He slipped through a service entrance, a door usually reserved for deliveries, left ajar by a careless hand. The air backstage was thick with the smell of sweat, stale cigarettes, and the lingering scent of expensive perfume. It was a world of controlled chaos, a hive of activity hidden from the adoring crowds. Roadies moved equipment, publicists whispered into phones, and security guards, though present, seemed more concerned with the front of house than the quiet corners. Arthur navigated it all with an almost preternatural calm, his focus absolute. He found himself in a dimly lit corridor, the muffled roar of the audience a distant echo. A door stood slightly ajar, a sliver of light escaping into the gloom. He heard voices, low and hushed, then a familiar, unmistakable laugh. It was Lennon's dressing room. His breath hitched. This was closer than he had ever dared to imagine. He pressed himself against the wall, listening, his mind racing. He heard snippets of conversation, talk of contracts, of future plans, of the relentless demands of the music industry. It was all so mundane, so ordinary, yet it was the very ordinariness that fueled Arthur's resentment. How could the man who preached revolution be so entangled in the machinery of commerce? Then the door opened wider. A security guard emerged, speaking into a walkie-talkie, his back to Arthur. This was his chance. Arthur slipped inside, silent as a whisper. The room was small, cluttered with clothes, half-eaten food, and scattered papers. And there, slumped in a worn armchair, a guitar resting against his knee, was John Lennon. He looked tired, his face etched with lines that the stage lights never revealed. He was alone, momentarily unguarded, lost in thought. Arthur stood frozen for a beat, the air thick with unspoken tension. Lennon looked up, his eyes, usually so sharp, now clouded with a distant weariness. He saw Arthur, not as a threat, but as an unexpected intrusion, a ghost in his private space. There was no immediate alarm, only a flicker of surprise, then a strange, almost resigned acceptance. The silence stretched, heavy and profound. Arthur felt a sudden, unexpected tremor of doubt. This wasn't the defiant, revolutionary Lennon he had imagined confronting. This was just a man, weary and vulnerable, caught in a moment of solitude. The secret, it seemed, was not in what Lennon hid, but in what he revealed in that unguarded glance. A profound, almost crushing loneliness. The silence in the dressing room was a living thing, pulsating with the weight of Arthur's unspoken accusations and Lennon's weary recognition. John, still slumped in the armchair, slowly straightened, his gaze now sharper, more focused. He didn't call for security. He didn't shout. He simply observed Arthur, a stranger who had breached the carefully constructed walls of his world. "Well," Lennon said, his voice low, raspy, a hint of the Liverpool lilt still present. "And who might you be then? Lost your way, have we?" There was no malice, only a detached curiosity, a weariness that suggested he had seen it all before. This was not the first time a fan had found their way into his private space, driven by a desperate need for connection. Or something darker. Arthur, emboldened by the lack of immediate aggression, stepped further into the room. His carefully rehearsed speeches, his furious questions, suddenly felt hollow, inadequate. The man before him was not the monolithic icon he had built up in his mind, but a flesh-and-blood human, flawed and fragile. Yet the anger still simmered. "I'm Arthur," he managed, his voice a little shaky. I came to see you." Lennon raised an eyebrow, a faint, cynical smile playing on his lips. "Oh? And what makes you think I'm here to be seen, Arthur? The show's out there, on the stage. This is where the magic dies, mate." He gestured vaguely around the cluttered room, a sardonic glint in his eye. "The real me, eh? Is that what you're after?" Arthur felt a surge of indignation. "I believed in you," he blurted out, the words tumbling out, raw and unfiltered. "We all did. Peace, love, no possessions, and then you live like this, in luxury, while the world burns. It's a lie, isn't it? All of it." His voice rose, the years of disillusionment pouring out. "You sold out. You betrayed us." Lennon listened, his expression unreadable. He picked up his guitar, idly strumming a discordant chord. The sound was a harsh counterpoint to Arthur's impassioned words. "Betrayal," Lennon repeated, the word hanging in the air like a heavy smoke. "That's a strong word, Arthur. Stronger than you know." He looked directly at Arthur, his eyes piercing. "What exactly did I promise you? A perfect world? A perfect me?" "You promised hope," Arthur retorted, his voice cracking with emotion. "You gave us a vision, and then you abandoned it. You became everything you told us to fight against. A rich man, disconnected, preaching from a golden tower." He gestured wildly, encompassing the room, the club, the entire opulent existence he imagined Lennon led. "What happened to the revolution? What happened to us?" Lennon put the guitar down, the faint smile gone. His face was a mask of weary resignation. "The revolution, Arthur," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "happens inside, every day, and it's a bloody mess. You think it's easy, carrying the weight of a generation's dreams? You think I asked for that crown?" He leaned forward, his gaze intense. "You see the headlines, the mansions, the limousines. You don't see the cages, the ones I built for myself and the ones others built around me." He paused, a profound sadness settling over his features. "You think I don't see the world burning? You think I don't feel the hypocrisy? Every single day, Arthur, it eats at me. It tears me apart." He ran a hand through his thinning hair, a gesture of profound exhaustion. "But what do you want from me? To live in a commune? To give away every penny? Would that make the world better? Would that make me better?" Arthur was stunned by the raw honesty, the unexpected vulnerability. This wasn't the arrogant rock star, the dismissive icon. This was a man wrestling with his own demons, his own contradictions. The secret, Arthur realized, was not a grand conspiracy, but a deeply personal struggle. Lennon was not a fraud, but a man burdened by the very ideals he had championed, trapped by the image he had helped create. The tension in the room shifted, from confrontation to a fragile, uncomfortable understanding. The idol was not broken, but profoundly human, and in that humanity, Arthur saw a reflection of his own disillusionment. The air in the dressing room crackled with a new kind of energy, a fragile bridge built between two souls on the precipice of understanding. Lennon, seeing the flicker of recognition in Arthur's eyes, pressed on, his voice now softer, almost confessional. The stage lights outside, the roar of the crowd, all faded into an irrelevant hum. This was the real performance, the one no one would ever see. "You think I don't remember the boy who wrote Imagine?" Lennon asked. His gaze distant, lost in a past that felt both glorious and agonizing. "He's still in here, Arthur, buried under the expectations, the demands, the sheer bloody noise of it all." He tapped his chest, a hollow sound. "But the world changes, people change, and sometimes the very things you fight for become the chains that bind you." He stood up, slowly, walking to a small, grimy mirror on the wall. He stared at his reflection, not with vanity, but with a profound, almost painful introspection. "They want a prophet, a guru, a perfect example. But I'm just a bloke from Liverpool, mate. A bloke who got lucky, got famous, and then got lost." He turned back to Arthur, his eyes holding a depth of sadness that was startling. "The money, the fame, it's a gilded cage. It gives you everything, and it takes away the one thing you truly need, the right to be ordinary, the right to make mistakes without the whole world dissecting them." Arthur felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had come seeking a villain, a clear-cut betrayer. Instead, he found a man haunted by his own legend. The image of the hypocrite began to crumble, replaced by something far more complex, far more tragic. He saw the toll that relentless public scrutiny had taken, the way the light of fame had cast long, distorting shadows. "I tried to escape it," Lennon continued, his voice barely above a whisper, "to find a corner where I could just be John. But there's no escaping John Lennon. Not in this city, not in this world. Every street corner holds a memory. Every face in the crowd sees a different version of me. The rebel, the lover, the cynic, the saint. They all want a piece, a confirmation of their own beliefs." He walked over to a small table, picking up a half-empty glass of whiskey. He didn't drink, just held it, turning it slowly in his fingers. "And the peace, Arthur? The love? It's a constant battle, not out there with governments and armies, but in here," he tapped his temple. "The real war is against your own demons, your own doubts, your own capacity for cruelty." A heavy silence descended, broken only by the distant thrum of the city. Arthur felt a profound shift within himself. His anger, once a raging fire, was now a dying ember, replaced by a chilling empathy. He saw the weight of the world on Lennon's shoulders, not just the world he had tried to change, but the world that had, in turn, changed him. "You wanted to know the truth," Lennon said, finally breaking the silence, his voice barely audible. He stepped closer to Arthur, his eyes locking onto his. "The truth is, Arthur, there are no easy answers, no perfect heroes, only flawed men trying to make sense of a mad world. And sometimes the loudest voices are the ones most desperately searching for their own quiet." He paused, then leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper, a secret meant only for Arthur, a confession that would echo in the young man's mind for years to come. "The real secret, Arthur," Lennon breathed, his eyes holding a profound, almost desperate plea, "is that the revolution, it starts and ends with you. It's not about me. It never was." The words hung in the air, a profound, unsettling revelation. It wasn't a grand exposé of Lennon's hypocrisy, but a shattering of Arthur's own illusions. The idol was not a fraud, but a mirror, reflecting the fans' own desperate need for external salvation. And in that whisper, the true weight of Lennon's legacy and the burden of his own humanity was laid bare. The whisper hung in the air, a spectral presence in the quiet room. "The revolution, it starts and ends with you. It's not about me. It never was." These words, delivered with such raw, unvarnished honesty, struck Arthur with the force of a physical blow. His carefully constructed world of righteous indignation, of a betrayed ideal, crumbled around him. He had come seeking to expose a fraud, but instead he had been exposed himself. Lennon stepped back, leaving Arthur to grapple with the profound implications of his confession. The idol, stripped of his gilded facade, was not the monster Arthur had imagined, but a man burdened by the very dreams he had inspired. The hypocrisy Arthur had so vehemently condemned was not a deliberate act of betrayal, but a tragic consequence of an impossible burden. Lennon was not a god, but a human, struggling with the same contradictions that plagued every soul. Amplified 1,000-fold by the relentless glare of fame, Arthur felt a wave of shame wash over him. His anger, once so clear and justified, now felt petty, self-serving. He had projected his own disillusionment, his own failures onto Lennon, demanding a perfection that no human could ever embody. He had sought external answers, a scapegoat for the world's imperfections, when the true battle, as Lennon had whispered, lay within. The confrontation he had so desperately sought had not yielded the answers he expected, but a far more unsettling truth. The secret was not a hidden vice, but a shared vulnerability. Lennon's struggle was not unique. It was the universal human struggle, magnified by the spotlight. The weight of a generation's hopes had not crushed Lennon alone, but had also distorted Arthur's perception, turning admiration into a bitter, demanding expectation. He looked at Lennon, truly looked at him, and saw not the distant icon, but a man etched with the scars of a life lived under an unforgiving microscope. The weariness in his eyes, the lines on his face, the quiet resignation in his posture, these were not the marks of a betrayer, but of a survivor, albeit a bruised and battered one. I don't know what to say," Arthur stammered, the fight drained from him. The words felt inadequate, hollow. He had come prepared for battle, not for this quiet, devastating revelation. Lennon offered a faint, almost melancholic smile. "You don't have to say anything, Arthur. Just think. Think about what you came looking for and what you found. Think about the difference." He picked up his guitar again, this time strumming a soft, almost mournful melody. It was a simple, unadorned tune, a stark contrast to the anthems of his public life. Arthur felt a profound shift within him. The world, which had once seemed so black and white, so clearly divided into heroes and villains, now revealed itself in shades of gray. His own life, his own choices, his own capacity for both idealism and cynicism, suddenly came into sharp focus. He had been so consumed by Lennon's perceived failures that he had neglected his own. The confrontation had not ended with a bang, but with a quiet, internal implosion. Arthur's idol was shattered, not by a revelation of his wickedness, but by the crushing weight of his humanity. And in that shattering, Arthur saw a path forward, a different kind of revolution, one that began not with grand pronouncements, but with a quiet, honest reckoning with oneself. The dark, mysterious truth he had sought was not a secret held by Lennon, but a shadow cast by his own expectations. The door to Lennon's dressing room opened, and a publicist, flustered and apologetic, peered in. "John, you're on in 5. The crowd's getting restless." She stopped, seeing Arthur, a stranger in the room. Her eyes narrowed, a silent alarm. Lennon simply nodded, a faint, knowing smile on his lips. He glanced at Arthur, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. "Right then," he said, his voice regaining a touch of its public swagger. "Duty calls." He picked up his guitar, slung it over his shoulder, and walked towards the door, leaving Arthur standing amidst the debris of his shattered illusions. Arthur watched him go, a profound sense of disorientation washing over him. The man who had just shared such raw vulnerability was now transforming, step by step, into the icon, the performer, the John Lennon the world demanded. The transition was seamless, almost frightening in its efficiency. The private man receded, replaced by the public myth. He lingered for a moment, the scent of stale cigarettes and unspoken truths hanging heavy in the air. Then, he turned and walked out of the dressing room, back into the bustling backstage area, a world that now seemed both familiar and utterly alien. He moved through the crowd of roadies and technicians, his mind reeling. The confrontation had happened, but not in the way he had ever anticipated. There was no grand exposé, no public shaming, only a quiet, devastating exchange that had reshaped his entire perception. He found his way out of the club, stepping back into the cold London night. The fog had thickened, shrouding the city in a ghostly embrace. The sounds of the street, the distant rumble of traffic, the muffled strains of Lennon's voice from inside the club. It all seemed to carry a new resonance, a deeper, more complex meaning. Arthur walked, aimlessly at first, then with a growing sense of purpose. The anger that had fueled him for so long had dissipated, replaced by a quiet, almost melancholic understanding. He no longer sought to tear down idols, but to build something within himself. Lennon's whisper, "The revolution, it starts and ends with you," echoed in his mind, a constant, unsettling reminder. He realized that his obsession with Lennon had been a distraction, a way to avoid confronting his own life, his own choices, his own disappointments. He had demanded authenticity from an icon, while perhaps lacking it in himself. The journey to expose Lennon had, in fact, exposed Arthur. The city of London, with its ancient secrets and modern anxieties, now seemed to offer not just shadows, but also possibilities. He saw the faces of strangers, each carrying their own burdens, their own hidden truths. He understood, with a chilling clarity, that everyone was fighting their own revolution, often in silence, often unseen. Arthur never spoke of that night. The encounter remained a secret, a profound personal turning point. He continued to listen to Lennon's music, but with new ears, hearing not just the anthems, but the echoes of a man wrestling with his own humanity, his own contradictions. He heard the vulnerability, the struggle, the profound loneliness that lay beneath the surface of the grand pronouncements. He understood that the true legacy of John Lennon was not just in the songs he sang, but in the questions he provoked, the uncomfortable truths he forced people to confront, both in the world and within themselves. And for Arthur, the most profound truth was that the search for meaning, for authenticity, was not a destination, but a lifelong journey, a quiet, internal revolution that never truly ended. The fog continued to cling to the London streets, obscuring the familiar, hinting at the unseen. And somewhere, in the heart of that enigmatic city, a man named Arthur walked, forever changed by a whisper in a quiet room, carrying an unwritten song of his own, a melody born of disillusionment, and ultimately of a fragile, hard-won understanding. The truth, he learned, was not a revelation, but a reflection. And sometimes, the most profound secrets are the ones we keep from ourselves.